people here today. Welcome, everyone. So we have a really fun talk. Our next talk is focusing on taking a look at the GitHub Copilot experience for your enterprise. And we have two speakers here today. We have April Edwards and Trevor Carnahan from GitHub. Welcome.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Has everyone had an awesome day so far? All right, that's what I like to hear. So I'm April Edwards. I'm a senior developer advocate at GitHub, and I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Trevor.
I'm Trevor Carnahan. I'm a principal engineer working on Copilot.
All right, so let's talk about that customized experience. But before we get started, we're going to level set with an agenda. So we're going to talk about GitHub Copilot today, how we're using it, maybe some of the limitations it has. And then we're going to talk about GitHub Copilot Enterprise, some of the features that are enabled in it. And then we're going to move into RAG, which is our new model that we're using to show you how you can customize that experience. So we can customize with our own code, using our own documentation, using your own repository, which is pretty cool. And then from there, we're going to talk about the fine-tuning stuff, which Trevor's going to really,
Super excited to talk about.
It's going to be awesome. Really excited. So how many of you are using GitHub Copilot today?
Nice.
I should see every single hand up there. It is the most widely used AI developer tool out there on the market today. We released this about 2 years ago, and it's been an amazing journey. It has literally just been changing all the time, and we've just been along for the ride, and it's been so much fun. So when we use GitHub Copilot, we wanted to build this AI developer-powered platform. Now, why? I mean, when I write code, I started using Copilot. It's really fun, but I've worked in a lot of agile engineering teams, and when we have that inception of an idea, we have to talk, we have to communicate, we have to collaborate. So how can we put Copilot into that so we can communicate better? Now, I'll be honest, I am an American. I'm also a Brit. I'm a dual citizen, so I speak 2 versions of English. But most of you out here, English is probably your second language. So when I speak English in whatever version I'm using that day, that may not be the version you're using. So when we collaborate, that communication piece is absolutely critical to how we write our code and how we deliver it. But we also need to be more productive. When we are writing code today in our environments, we're expected to do more with less and deliver faster. So how can we be more productive? How can we do this more efficiently? And then we need to secure this. Do I have any security experts in the room? A couple of you. When I started engineering, I had to become a security enthusiast, we'll call it. I had to start liking security, and security was tough for me. I don't know how you felt about security.
It's a mindset.
Yep, it is. But it's critical to every project. Security begins at day 0. Security begins when your developers clone their code. So we need to embed that with Copilot, and that's what we're building in our platform. But then scalability. So GitHub's a pretty good sized organization, but we started from the ground up in 2008. I've also worked at Microsoft. We're a huge enterprise, so we have to scale. So whether you're working for a large organization that needs to embrace and migrate into GitHub, maybe you're using another tool today, we have to think about that, how you'll scale that. But then maybe if you're in a startup mentality, you want to scale that and build that out the right way from day one. So GitHub Copilot is trusted by enterprises worldwide, right? We all have seen the stats. We've all seen who's used it. We have over 1 million paid users on the GitHub Copilot platform today using Copilot. Stack Overflow actually ran a survey this year in 2023. 55% of developers that are using AI coding tools choose GitHub Copilot. Why? Because they like it. But here at GitHub, we've developed these first-party relationships. We want to build a platform that helps you run on trust. So if any of you have used ChatGPT, a lot of the limitation we've had in ChatGPT is that we're using a third-party tool. We don't have guardrails, we don't have security, we don't have those boundaries. So here at GitHub, we've partnered with Microsoft and OpenAI to build that enterprise platform for you because we feel that's critical. So I like numbers, so bear with me. I was a math major, so if any of you don't like math, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna make you do any math, I promise. But I like talking about the stats. I've worked in high-performing DevOps organizations, and I've worked in less agile organizations, but we always wanna measure our outcome. What's our success? How do we show success? And when we're embracing Copilot, I've worked with so many enterprises where they go, how do we get started? How do we know it's useful to us? And here at GitHub, we've measured that. We've provided some statistics, and it's something that, we can look at. Maybe we're taking a task. First time we use Copilot and go, right, I'm gonna do this task on my own. It takes me 5 hours. Maybe with Copilot, it takes me 5 minutes. That's a pretty good improvement. That's a marked improvement that we can use. So here at GitHub, we've looked at some of those stats. Now, 96% of people that we surveyed had faster code completion, especially with repetitive tasks. And that led them to being 88% more productive. Now, how many of you became a developer to do to do the same task every single day? Yeah, I didn't. I want to be creative, right? We hire creative developers. We hire people that are smart, creative, and they can do cool stuff. So we want to enable you to do that. And that's one of the great stats about Copilot that we're seeing today. We want to enable those developers to do more. Another stat is staying in the flow. 73% of people reported that they were more in the flow. Now, that means we spend less time on those repetitive tasks. So there were 77% of people that report they spent less time searching and more time focusing on those meaningful tasks. Now, how many of you open up a web browser, maybe Stack Overflow or Bing, Google, whatever, and you search for something and then you go in a rabbit hole? I mean, I built my career on Google, I'm not gonna lie. It has taught me a lot. So is Stack Overflow. But then I find other answers to other things. I find all these other things that are great. And I'm learning a lot, but I've lost that flow. So staying in that flow is really important for developer productivity. And I'll be honest, as a developer, how many of you spend 8 hours a day coding? I don't see any hands in the audience. I wish, right? I spend most of my time waiting on other people, waiting on compute, waiting on access, waiting on things, or in meetings. Now, sprint ceremonies are super critical. But as a developer, we don't spend all day writing code. So the time we do have, I need to be in the flow. Do you need to be in the flow?
Absolutely.
So we've also found that we have 55% faster overall project delivery. And 60% of people reported that they were more fulfilled with their job and less frustrated when they were coding. We're in an interesting time in the industry, right? We need to be effective in what we do. And if you're not happy in your job, you're going to leave. How many of you left a job because you're writing fun code? I've left a job because I've been bored, right? I hate those repetitive tasks. I work in a lot of DevOps practices and methodologies, and I teach people about automating all the things. And we always look at automating things going, well, I don't have time to automate this. But how do we take away those repetitive tasks? How do we be more proactive? So these stats are a really good way to measure the success in your organization with Copilot today. But you all spoke to us, and here at GitHub, we listened. You want a more customized experience. All right. So specifically, customers asked for suggestions and responses that reflected an understanding of your of your actual code bases, your own code bases, not public ones, and best practices. Because every organization has some best practices and standards that they want to code to. But we also want to work better with more specific languages. How many of you still writing COBOL? I actually spoke to someone last night. They're coding in COBOL. I saw a hand. All right, yes. I spoke to someone last night. They're using like various versions of COBOL. Like not just one, but various. So they need to specify those languages. And every organization has specific coding styles and standards they need to adhere to. One of the biggest things with Copilot is acceptance rates. How many of you accept every single Copilot suggestion 100% of the time? I don't see any hands. So we need to improve that acceptance rate. We need to improve the accuracy of it to us. So we've all kind of talked about GitHub Copilot Business today, right? It includes all sorts of features that we're pretty familiar with, and that's Copilot for Business. Now, Copilot for Enterprise includes everything Copilot for Business, including the new platform experience in the web version, which I'm going to show you shortly. We've added things for Copilot skills for documentation and also pull requests, and we're going to do some code review as well. And what we've done with GitHub Copilot in the web interface as a platform, we've anchored it with that chat experience, that really friendly experience. We want to interpret your code from within your repository and answer questions within your documents and including your pull request. And most importantly, we want to give you a conversational experience. And we can reference the context where your code actually came from, not just a public repository. Interestingly enough, GitHub builds GitHub with GitHub. True story. We all use GitHub internally. Trevor and I are in different teams. We work and live and breathe in GitHub. If you're in marketing, you're in sales, you're in HR, you're using GitHub every single day. Now, if you're not a developer, you're not as familiar with the platform, you might get a little conscious about how to do things. That's why we built this platform experience. But we want to be able to facilitate better collaboration between our development teams and our technical teams. And we often work in silos. How do we break down those barriers? So being able to level set that, provide that platform experience is what we've aimed to do.
All right. So I'm just going to pause. I like this slide. It took me a minute for my OCD brain to be okay with the logos aren't quite aligned quite right. But like once I internalized the vision, like how can we actually take the experience of Copilot, and that's right now today in their developer IDE and in their terminals, but how do we also apply that AI vision to the broader platform. How do we apply that AI vision to the tools and lifecycle that they're using today? And this really speaks to me. Like, I'm sure, like, as a developer, as an engineering leader, you see all of these problems. Like, AI could help with this. Whether it's like you're a new developer, you're trying to ramp up on a legacy or brownfield code base, like, I just need something to explain this regex to me or this code to me. Or you're reading through it and like, man, this last developer did not do a stellar job on the documentation. Or how can AI help me make this code a little more readable, understandable? How could it help me secure this code? Something that's big on our minds at GitHub right now, how can I make this code more accessible for my customers? AI can help with all these tasks. And really, when you add all that up together, your developers are going to be more satisfied and you're going to have better retention. And so we're really excited about the prospect of what AI in the entire platform can do for our customers in the tools that they're already using today. So we're really excited about that. April, why don't you give us a demo and show us what we actually mean?
Are you all ready to actually see this in real life? You guys don't sound very excited. I don't think they want to see the demo.
No demos.
Let's try this again. Do you guys actually want to see this in real life? Yeah. All right. So I like to live dangerously.
Guardrails are off.
Guardrails are off. We're going. All right. So I'm going to show you what the new RAG model looks like within the platform experience. So this is the retrieval augmented generation, where we're indexing our code in our repositories and giving it context to the actual experience. Can we switch back to the other screen, please?
There we go.
Awesome. So this is a code base. This is a private code base. A lot of us work in private code bases. We can't share our code publicly. And that's absolutely understandable. So I'm here in my IDs. Everyone here happy with dark mode? Good. We're staying in dark mode. All right. So this is an existing code base. And in my existing code base, I'm picking up new code. And do I have any Python developers here? Awesome. I'm not. But we're going to play with Python, right? And we've all done this. We've all taken on a project in code we're less experienced with. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the chat experience here in the platform. It's already looking at this repository. We can see here that it's pulling up the private repository that we're working in. And actually, the first thing I want to do is I want to tell it which file specifically I want to look at. So maybe I was assigned a task in my sprint, and I'm going to look at this utils.py file. So I'm going to tell it to reference this file, and then I'm going to ask Copilot, I don't know, what the heck is this thing doing?
How's it work?
So we can see as we queried Copilot here, we can see the reference file that it's pulling in. And it goes into that utils.py file. It's telling us how it's working. It tells us what our expressions are doing. We have regexes in there. And it's giving us some good stuff. All right. This is a good way to get started, right? We've referenced that file. It's already pulled up that reference in the repository. So we can get started writing some code. I'm just going to go ahead and clear this out and take Copilot down for a second. We're going to go into our code base, and I'm going to go into the actual file we were just looking at. So I can query Copilot from the platform experience. The other thing I can do with Copilot is I can look at my code base, and I can select it. And I can go to the little Copilot symbol here that appears on the left-hand side. So as I'm writing my code, I'm looking at my code base, I'm working from the platform. I can ask Copilot about this snippet. I can also hit the drop-down here and ask it to explain my code. So what I've done is I've just given it 2 direct references to my code, to that exact file of how I want to reference it. And it's given me a pretty darn good explanation of what we're doing here. Everyone good with that? Happy? Do we understand what our code's doing? Copilot did a pretty good job. So I've actually gone ahead and made some changes in our code before. I'm a pretty good developer. I've opened up a pull request. We've fixed some bugs. We've written some unit tests. Now, when I write a pull request, I get a little lazy. I'm rushing, right? We're always time limited in pushing our code because we've got a deadline. We need to get it over the line. And sometimes I'm just not good at explaining things because I'm rushed. So I can go in and see the files that I've changed. I've actually made some changes to our Python files here. I did a lot of this with Copilot. I can look at the diff here. Pretty happy with that. okay. And we've all been here, right? We've looked at our code and go, yeah, we've done some things. We've made some changes. We've actually changed some of our Python code. And I've actually written some tests as well. I mean, code coverage is pretty important.
It is.
So instead of saying I did some things, I'm going to go ahead and edit our comment. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the Copilot actions. I'm going to ask it to generate a summary for me. Now, this is going to look at the file we've just referenced from our pull request, the 4 files we've just changed, and it's going to generate the summary. Now, this is live and on the fly, so we're living a little dangerously right now. I feel like I need like good hold music. I can tell a really bad joke if you guys want. You want to hear a bad joke? Okay, good. Phew. All right.
Saved.
Saved by the bell. So it's actually looked at my code, it's looked at the changes I've made, and it's referenced the files. Because anytime we've gone to make a pull request, we're going, yeah, we changed some code, we did some things, that person has to go into the change files. Like instead, go see this, go see the diff, and actually know what files I changed. And it can see that I made some testing improvements, right? We like writing tests, don't we? We love tests.
Love tests.
We love 100% code coverage. I made some functionality improvements, and I also made some code-based improvements, and you can see the files I changed here. So that's pretty cool. That's given me some stuff, and then we can go ahead, push our changes, and merge our changes. Now, that's great, but sometimes we want to do a net new project. So I want to go ahead and do a net new project.
I really like this demo. Proceed.
Do you want to build a website?
Yeah. Can we make it in React?
We're going to build a React website.
Sweet.
Yeah, let's go. So I'm in the chat experience here, and I can pull this up to a little bit more of an immersive experience. So I can fill my screen with it. Instead of using a little side piece, I can have it at full screen. Now, I can also just do some general coding with GitHub Copilot chat in the platform here. I can ask it questions like, how do I do DevOps? How do I write code? I'm going to ask it, how do I, let's see, I don't know, build a React website. So it's going to give us some output. All right, we need to install NPM. Yes, node. Do a few things. Pretty generic. But at GitHub, we have a specific way that we build our React websites. We have certain coding standards, right? We can't just do it maybe the way that Stack Overflow showed us or Google showed us. I need to actually be a little bit more specific. So I'm going to go ahead and go into a new conversation with Copilot. And I have what's called a doc set here. I'm going to select this doc set. This is a private doc set. We created this doc set, and we told that doc set we want these repositories included in our reference material. So I've created a doc set that says I need these 4 repositories created because these are some standards that we're working towards. And I can ask it to explain the concept. So I can ask Copilot the exact same question that I just asked it. I failed typing in school, don't mind me. And it's going to give us a different answer. So we've given it specific reference, specific context to our code base. And we can already see that actually it's telling us to install Yarn. The last instance didn't tell us to do that. And it's giving us a very different output. So what's really cool about this context is I can look at the output. I can copy the code right from here by copying that. I don't have to leave that IDE experience. And if I scroll down here, I can see the 6 files that it referenced to find our code. Okay? So I can also link to those files, read further, but I see that reference. I see the context from our doc set that we've built. So we've indexed our code into that doc set. It's reading it and spitting out our answer specific to that doc set that we've configured. Now, isn't that cool? I think that's cool. So this is GitHub. When you go to GitHub, this is it. This is us deploying it. This is the live repository right here. Okay, so when we make changes, let's say we've built a website, we're doing a thing, we're working in an existing code base, we want to actually look at that context again. When we deploy anything to GitHub, so if any of you are maintainers, GitHub stars, or out in the community, or you sign up for a beta program, we use feature flags. Feature flags are one of my favorite things to use when writing code because it's so easy to deploy that feature out and revert it if it doesn't go well. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up Copilot again. So we have this immersive experience that we can pull up in that repo. I'm going to go ahead and clear the conversation so it takes away that context. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tell it, I can also give it the context I want it to. So sometimes you may not see it listed. In this specific instance, I know this repository is GitHub. It will pull this repository specifically. So it's indexed the repository instead of a doc set. So I've pulled up a single repo instead of a set of doc sets. The other thing that's really cool is we see the little green check mark here. We've indexed that already. That's been indexed for us. And we have accessibility to that. So I may ask this, how does .com handle feature flags? Because I need to know how to deploy feature flag the GitHub way. I don't need to attach a file. I've just actually called it that indexed repo, and it's going to go ahead and give us an output. What I really love about this output is it tells us how to do it, gives us a walkthrough, and it references those documentation. So we actually write GitHub with Ruby.
Yes, we do.
And Ruby's another language that Copilot's been really beneficial for.
Since 2008, 15 years.
That's a lot of Ruby. That's a long time. There's a lot of legacy stuff in there, I think. So it's given us a summarization of how to do this. Now, the other thing is, I've only pulled that one repository instead of a sub-created doc set. We can see these files here, what it's referenced. So we can kind of correct if it's the right references that we need to do. So if we're looking to index other repositories or create our own custom doc set with repositories, we can see how valid those references are. So here I can see what files it's called, it's giving me the actions, and then I have that experience ready to go. All right.
That's great.
Cool. So Trevor's going to go ahead and go further into the RAG model and all the amazing things that it does.
Yeah, that was an amazing demo. Yeah, for sure. If my demo goes that well, I'm going to be super stoked. So we're going to take a little bit of pause. Like, I think we've been getting a good tour of like what is going to be shipping in part of Copilot Enterprise. And a big part of that is how Copilot Enterprise takes advantage of RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, and using that in the prompt engineering. And we're going to pause and take a bit of a turn in the talk and also just talk about like, well, how do we customize these large language models to have a better tailored experience for customers, and talk about it as an LLM development point of view. And so there's two big kind of ways we can customize these applications. One we've been just talking about a lot, which is RAG. We can basically use retrieval methods to basically feed the LLM a bunch of context and put that in the prompt, send it to the LLM, and get a more customized response back. Very common, a lot of trends. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the next slide. And then there's the other form of customization, which is fine-tuning a custom model. And so we'll spend the rest of the session talking about that in a lot more detail, and hopefully have a good demo for that as well. All right. For this slide, this is retrieval augmented generation. It's a generic workflow. I'm not really going to drain the slide. I think probably a lot of you have seen similar kinds of slides. Instead, what I'm going to do is just talk about kind of some of the pros and cons of using retrieval augmented generation, and when you would use it, and maybe why some of the downsides of why you wouldn't use it in certain scenarios. So one of the biggest benefits is the fact that you can essentially use your custom knowledge in a knowledge store to add additional context into the prompt that's going to allow you to get a better answer out of the LLM. And what's great about that is you might have a pre-trained LLM that, I don't know, maybe it has 6 months old, 12 months old, 18 months old. And so it's a good way for you to give more recent context to the LLM and get a higher quality response out of that model. Another big advantage of RAG is that it lets you blur that boundary between public domain and your private context. And so that's why we talk about it a lot in the context of customization. We want to blur, not just have answers that reference open domain data or your open source data, but we want to blur that line and actually put your private organization data into the response. And so it blurs that line between public and private domains. And then another reason why we're all super excited about RAG is if you've been paying attention to LLMs recently, you know that that context size keeps growing. So when we first launched Copilot, I think our prompt size was 2,000 tokens. We keep upgrading it, 4,000, 8,000. You look at some of the latest models that people are using, 32,000 tokens. And so you can bet that there will continue to be a trend towards taking advantage of that large context window. So those are advantages. Let's talk about some of the downsides or challenges. You still have a finite prompt size. You can't fit the world into that prompt. And so eventually you start to run into limits, very large code bases, very large context that you want to fit into that, and then doing the retrieval method starts to fall down. There's also a performance penalty, right? Like, okay, you got to do a network round hop, go query a database, get that context. You have to do a bunch of prioritization, like what context is most valuable to this query. And then you need to actually take the time to send all that context to the LLM and pay a bunch of money for that LLM to process all those tokens and generate the output based on it. So there's definitely a cost, both in terms of GPU cost as well as network cost and latency cost to using retrieval. And then engineering, you're gonna pay some cost to set up, reindex, maintain those indexes, and maintain those indexes over the long term. So there's definitely a cost, engineering cost to retrieval as well. All right, we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about custom fine tuning. And right now, I'm pretty excited because like with Copilot Enterprise, we are launching the private beta of custom fine-tuned models. And it really comes with 3 kind of feature areas that we talk about a lot when we talk about fine-tuning. One is just personalization. You know, you're gonna get a more customized response based on your repo context and your developers' behaviors out of that model. And we also talk about it in terms of efficiency and quality. So efficiency in the terms of the responses coming out of the model, your developers are going to be more likely to accept. April was talking about the accept rate. But then it's not just about the accept rate, it's also about the quality. So your developers should have to do less editing of what they accepted. And so whatever we're producing should be more ready to push. And then the other one is private inferencing. So this feature built all the way from the ground up in terms of security and privacy in mind. You need to make sure you have good isolation from how we're referencing your code, how we're fine-tuning the custom model, how we're hosting your private model now that you've got all of your IP fine-tuned into this model. No one else can access it. You're on dedicated GPUs and inferencing hardware as well, and that's super important. All right, demo time. We ready to take a look, see what this looks like? Can I get the other screen here? Awesome, that was quick. I like it. And we're back on GitHub, and we're setting the scene, and we're gonna build on what April was talking about. We're gonna pretend we're developers adding a feature flag in GitHub. I'm not gonna belabor it too much, but we're gonna pretend we're gonna add a feature flag so that if your repo has a bunch of stars, we're gonna turn on a feature flag for you. If you haven't used GitHub very much, stars is up here in the upper right. It's kind of like a like button for your repo. If you're popular, you get lots of stars. And so what we're gonna do is also just talk about Ruby for a second. The fact that GitHub was built in Ruby makes this a really good candidate for fine tuning. The reality is, as much as we've loved Ruby for the last 15 years, there just isn't as much Ruby in the open source domain as, say, a TypeScript or a Python. And so the model doesn't have as much reference material. So we believe that adding all of our GitHub Ruby code into the training, we're going to be able to get better Ruby code out.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Let's try it. Let's try it. And so to get started, I'm just going to work in code spaces. And you can get a new code space here by just hitting the code button. The plus button would give me a new code space on the default branch of the repo, or ... Let me specialize it. I actually have the cooking show. I got a couple of code spaces already lined up. And I'm gonna hit the button and let her tell you all the cool things about code spaces.
So I didn't lie when I said GitHub builds GitHub on GitHub. We code in code spaces all the time. I do use VS Code locally, very rarely anymore. Do everything from a code space. Why? Because I've got 4 devices in my office, and I have Macs and I have PCs. So my coding environments are identical. I can code from the browser. Also, getting started in a code base. Trevor, how long does it take you to clone the GitHub repository? Do you know?
I don't want to know, but somebody told me 45 minutes. And
46 minutes, but who's counting? It takes 46 minutes. So we want our developers to be pushing into production day 0. My first day at GitHub, and I have one of my managers over there in the corner can attest, day 0, I was pushing code to production on GitHub. How? Code spaces. So spin up a code space in a couple minutes. It's our containerized environment. It's a secure environment in the cloud. It is hosted on Azure. You can pay for the compute you need, because very often our machines crash. And being a developer, I've also been given a machine that's like dusted off, been in the corner for a few years, and it can't always process the tests and the debugging that I'm trying to do in my code. And I will absolutely crash my machine. So using a code space has alleviated that problem, and it means every developer in my team has an exact identical experience. And we don't have to pull the code down locally. So earlier I said that security starts for the moment your developers clone your code. We're not putting any code on our machines. And Trevor's actually going to show you how he pulls the code space into the VS Code IDE with actually, he doesn't pull down the code. So it's a lot faster, a lot more streamlined, and he's good to go. Did you break the code space?
I did. I pulled up the wrong one, and then I pulled up the right one. So we.
And the good news, when a code space breaks, you just restart it.
Yeah. All right. So what we're connected to is a code space that's connected to the generic Copilot model. So this is going to be the base model that everybody uses today. And so we're going to do a side-by-side trial. We're going to see what Copilot does today and what a custom fine-tuned model will do when we're doing this simple coding task. So one important point that I want to call out is if I saw a lot of hands when have you used Copilot. So if you've used Copilot, you know that we get a lot of additional context in other open tabs. And so we can build a better prompt for the model if you have some related code open in neighboring tabs. So I do not have any neighboring tabs here. So we're really trying to test what can Copilot, the base model, do with this demo. So no open tabs. We're just working in one file here. And I'm in the feature flag Ruby file. And really, for this simple coding task, all I want to do is create another cache for the GitHub repo Stargazer count. And so let's see what Copilot will do for me. I know when I define GitHub, can't spell. I'm glad you set the bar high for me there, April.
I'm here to help.
Repo. And then we'll call this Stargazer's cache. Stargazer's, it's trying to help me here, cache. And we'll see what the default model is going to give me. And practicing the demo, I've gotten like 3 different answers. This is definitely one of them, so I'll accept this one. It's not the best suggestion. It's a one-line suggestion. It didn't really observe a lot of how I'm building a lot of the caches in the other previous files. So it's something that I can work with, but it's not a totally great solution. So what we're going to do next is we're going to flip over to another code space that we have open. Hopefully we're still connected here. So this is an identical setup. The only difference is now I'm connected to GitHub's latest fine-tuned model. And I talked to it a little bit later, but we've been practicing fine-tuning on the GitHub repository for over 2 years now. So we've got a lot of practice doing this. And so I'll just try the same task. So we'll just say define GitHub repo Stargazers.
So what makes this fine-tuning special, though, Trevor?
Well, one is we've got a lot of practice. And I said that one. Of course, you asked me the question.
I'm sorry.
Mess up. All right, I'm going to accept this suggestion, and then I'm going to answer your question. Pretty different. So now what the Copilot is coming back with is it has a lot of that boilerplate from that cache function, which is making me as a developer much more productive, staying in the flow. And the other thing that I'm going to notice here, it adds all of my metrics and all my observability, my metrics in the code. And then this last line here is the important one. I know enough about the GitHub code base to know that if I was actually going to access where would I go get the repo count, Stargazer count on the repo, this is actually the function that I would need. So this is indeed suggesting the right internal APIs for the GitHub repo based on the prompt in just the model. And it didn't have any of that information in any other tabs. So it's the model inherently knows our APIs, and this is going to make me a lot more productive. All right, what makes this different or special? There's a couple things. One is there's a lot of techniques that go into the fine-tuned model. I think even competitors know how to add additional code as a data source, but we have 2 other machine learning techniques that we use to have data sources for fine-tuning. So we have a richer set of data that we fine-tune with, as well as you were talking about the acceptance rate. So when we talk about quality of these fine-tuned models, it's not just acceptance rate, right? We want to make sure that it's not just the developer accepts the code, but they have to change the code that they accept less. And that tells us that, okay, the suggestions are of higher quality. And so we've been measuring that really closely in our fine-tuning alphas and really encouraged by the results there. As well as there's a magic component of Copilot. We kind of experienced it here, right? The difference between like a one-line suggestion and please just write the whole function for me. And so we call those multi-line suggestions. And it's easy to game these fine-tuned models and trick the rewards model to over-index on accept rate. And it's a lot easier for developers to accept a single-line completion. But we don't want to compromise. We still want Copilot to also give us a lot of multi-line suggestions. And so we need to make sure that we're tuning for that as well. All right, we can show these side by side, I think. Let's test my Mac skills here. Is that how you do it? Side by side? So you can see the difference between those two implementations. Here's the base model, and here's the custom model. And that's it. I think we can switch back to slides.
Yay, it worked.
All right. This is a good way to segment into the alpha program that we've been launching. We've had 3 alpha customers that we've been working really closely with. We've got AMD and Mercado Libre, and also the Microsoft Office team, and we're really excited about that. AMD, some of you hopefully were there for the second keynote, where AMD got on its stage and talked about the success they've been having. Not to totally rehash what Alex said on stage, but we've seen a ton of improvement with them, and we're excited about that. They've got thousands of hardware developers, and they use a language called System Verilog. And do you know Verilog?
I don't know System Verilog. Nope. Nope.
There's not a lot of Verilog in open source either, so they're a great candidate for this. And they actually ran an internal survey on the alpha the alpha program, and what blew us away was they actually, according to their internal analysis of their alpha users, they had an NPS score of 83% for those developers. So 83% of those alpha developers said, I would recommend Copilot to a peer to use this. And the other correlated metric is like, would you use Copilot for production use? Certainly sensitive for hardware guys. And 77% of them said that they would use this in production. So we're super excited what we're seeing with AMD in the hardware space. The second one, Mercado Libre, we're seeing statistically significant lifts in acceptance rate for them. And they've already had high acceptance rates, so to see even boosts on top of that was really exciting for us. And their technique that they benefited from was less about being able to train on their code, more the technique was about can we learn from an organization with thousands of developers. So when you have a large enterprise, you have a huge opportunity to even get better results from Copilot fine-tuning. And then also Microsoft Office Excel, huge C++ shop. Not a ton of that in the wild either. We started with a small focus group, and they're rolling it out to all of Office, so I'm super excited about that too. Go to the next one, and we got some, maybe you've seen this again already. We've got a kind of template UX that we're thinking about for the private beta, obviously subject to change, but we want to make it super simple, easy for your administrators to set up one of these fine-tuned models for your organization, get started quickly and easily.
And here's the beta link. So if you all want to get started, here's the link. Join the wait list.
Yeah.
All the cool things. Right, so real fast. I mean, I know we're running out of time. Oh, go. Well, hold on, we got more. Well, it's coming again. Chill out. I know, sorry. We're rushing.
QR codes are coming, promise.
We got more, promise. So recap, I think, for the most part, RAG is fantastic. It's taking it's indexing your code, your documentation, and using that as data to create that context that you can directly pull from. And I think the most important thing in all of it, especially with fine-tuning, it will not make you a cup of coffee.
No, it will not.
I've asked. It says no. But for all of you that want to actually see the links, the middle link is your fine-tuning link. I promise you I'd bring it back. We also have the GitHub Copilot Trust Center, especially in the enterprise space. That's really critical. You want to know the boundaries, all the ins and outs of the legality side. And then we have a good Skill Up Cloud Skills Challenge that is out there with a free learning path of how to use GitHub-y stuff, especially around Copilot and all that good stuff. And I know we're kind of tight on time, but Trevor and I will be here to ask questions after. And we just want to thank you all for joining us today. And please don't forget to fill out the session scores, perfect scores for us, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.